mass media.
Mixed Grounds is proud to present I Just Wanted to Push Record, celebrating arts, community, and culture. Part of the Olas Media Network.
Welcome to I Just Wanted to Push Record, a producer's podcast, where lifestyle, arts, community, culture, and production meet. Two producers, two cultures, and a whole lot of flavor. Join hosts Lena and JC for fun conversations, cool interviews, sharing tips, laughing through production hiccups, and celebrating the art of it all. Ready to roll? It all starts with pushing record.
Hello, hello. Welcome to I Just Wanted to Push Record, a producer's podcast. I am Lena, and right now we don't have JC with us. I hope he can jump on later. But today we have a very special guest with us, Javier Marín, a media entrepreneur, co-owner of Tiempo in Washington, D.C. and Boston, and author of Live from America, How Latino TV Conquered the United States. So Javier has been deeply involved in Spanish language media in the U.S. for decades, and his new book dives into the rise of the Spanish international network that eventually became Univision. So I want to introduce Javier, and please tell us about you, where you're from, and all these amazing projects you have been working on.
Well, Lena, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm very honored. I don't know if JC is scared of this conversation, and that's why he's not here. But I'm here, and yeah, a little bit very fast about me because it's mainly the book. What I would love to talk, especially for the times that we're living right now. That I came to this country from Maracaibo, Venezuela, in year 2000. Because of the same reason of many Venezuelan left the country. Starting, I think I was one of the first to leave, being related to media. Whenever you have an autocrat or even a dictator, because Hugo Chavez started elected, but then he stayed in power in Venezuela. The first thing that they start to blame any tragedy or any negative things about the country is the media. And so I decided to leave temporarily. My wife and I, and the two babies, my wife and I decided let's move to the U.S. and have some experience and then come back, because we never thought that the dictator was going to last that long.
Oh, yeah.
So our idea was to come and study. I did an MBA, and then the story of Venezuela. We decided to stay, and because the industry where I was always related was media, I decided to first look for a job on traditional media after I graduated from my MBA. And I realized that not being a native English speaker and with this accent, I would say is the most difficult industry to cross over.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I can relate to that.
Exactly. So more than engineering, or this is whenever look, what you're doing is very brave, because doing content in English, how competitive it is and how difficult to enter that industry. So I realized that was difficult, and I went on and did my research on the Spanish-speaking media, because I realized the community at that time, 26 years ago, it was close to. If I remember well, it was close to 40 million. I have those numbers here. It was 35 million actually, and in year 2000. Right now we're 62 million.
Wow.
But 35 million. Yeah, I keep growing. So at that time was very interesting figure, and I decided to enter into the Spanish-speaking media. And that's how I'm being an owner, being an entrepreneur. I've always been an entrepreneur and a media entrepreneur, which is different than saying an entrepreneur of other industries, because in media you are looking for two main assets: not only the value of your entrepreneurial adventure, but also the impact you're um, originating and doing in the community you are serving. And that's how I decided to study the most successful as a business media company in the U.S., which still is Univision.
That's amazing.
So that's how I started doing that research just for my own consumption. And what I found was so fascinating. And I never, I never thought I was going to publish a book about it because I thought that story should be out there anytime. But nobody told the story the way I did, and that's the reason why I ended up publishing. But in the meantime, I studied, and I started a Spanish newspaper in Boston, where I emigrated first. I lived from year 2000 to 2020 in Boston, Massachusetts. So I started a Spanish newspaper there. Then I purchased the Spanish newspaper from the Washington Post called El Tiempo Latino, and that's how the company grew. Right now, I am not in the day-to-day of the company. My second generation is. My nephew is the CEO, and I have a son that also works on the business development, and a niece also that works on finance. So I'm very proud to say that the young
Yeah.
wanted to keep
The legacy, keep growing
yeah.
that you have worked so hard for. Yeah.
And it's such a difficult industry, right? With a lot of changes that are going on.
Very.
So that's my story. Now I live in the state of Maine in a little town called Algonquin, an hour and a half north of Boston, and I published this book, Live from America: How the Latino TV Conquered the U.S., which is actually the history of the evolution of the use of a Spanish language in the U.S., together with the story of Univision.
That is really amazing. Thank you for sharing that because I can relate to a lot of things you're mentioning. As a Colombian Latina living in the US, I grew up I grew up and seeing all these TV shows or telenovelas or anything, that will connect through my culture and where we're from. And even though when I migrated to United States, I was still looking for that type of connection, right? Checking like what can I see for a program that to entertain me, but also to keep me connected with my people, right? And that's the Spanish language. And through the years, it's amazing like how to see a little bit of the history when Spanish was also like then in the United States. And right now to see people like you protecting that and keeping it up like is really encouraging. So for me it's really fascinating and I'm very happy to see all and to know all the work that you have done and keeping the legacy, like the family keeping it. That's even more fascinating. So I wanted to ask you, when you decided to create all this and like, with the Tiempo, the newspapers, the Univision, it wasn't just entertainment. Like, what did you see in there? What was the purpose of it?
Well, the history I narrate in the book, it's not only fascinating, it empowers uh, our community to understand that this is all a cycle. The history of this country has always um, come and go into the empowerment or the rejection of the use of Spanish and our community in the U.S. Imagine in the 1950s and 60s, we were only 3.5 million Hispanics in the country. Okay, only 3.5. And at that time, a family from Mexico um, that was already successful in Mexican television and radio decided to replicate that business in the U.S. because the abuelo, was in the book, is his nickname is El León. Um, he knew that the immigration of Mexicans was going to grow. He always said we're going to be 15 20 millions in the next 20 years for sure. Well, he was short, right? Because we are now
Yeah.
60 million, and not only Mexicans, and now we're all around.
Oh yeah.
So he decided to replicate that business, but there were a lot of restrictions and obstacles. Imagine, a family from Mexico trying to replicate um, a TV network in the US, which was almost impossible. I mean, anybody that would think about in the 50s and 60s to start a TV network in the US, it has many obstacles and restrictions. At that time, remember, there was no internet, no cable, no satellite. So it was only three big networks: ABC, CBS, and NBC, CBS, and ABC.
Yeah.
Those three that started with radio and then TV. Nobody else was allowed. There were small TV stations in little towns, rural towns, called low power TVs, but there was only three national. And at the same time, there was an additional restriction, which was by law, no TV network could be owned for more than 25% of foreigners.
Oh,
So
wow.
the law stipulated until 2017, actually, that no foreigners could own more than 25% of a TV network.
Wow.
And these guys
Did
did
not
it.
know that. That's
And these
crazy.
guys did it. They went around that law with a fascinating story. They had an employee in Mexico called Reynold Vincent Anselmo. He was born in the suburbs of Boston, but they had an employee in Mexico who was a gringo, and
Mhm.
he loved living in Mexico. He was a character, actually. He was retired from the Navy. He fought in the Pacifics in the World War I, and then in the 40s he decided, in the past the cinema in Mexico was very famous worldwide. It was a golden era of the Mexican
Oh,
cinema.
yeah.
So everybody who was in the cinema wanted to get something related to it was like a Hollywood equivalent,
Mhm.
but it was in Mexico. So he decided to move to go to college with a scholarship from being a veteran, and in Chicago, and he wanted to be an actor, and actually a comedian. Well, he wanted to be an actor, but he wasn't that handsome, let's say, to be an actor at that time. So he
Yeah.
became a comedian, and he was
Okay.
great, very intelligent, very a big reader of literature. And so he decided during college, to do an exchange in Mexico with this theater company. Still insisted that he wanted to be an actor, and it made it worse, right? Because he had an accent, he didn't speak Spanish,
Oh my God,
and
yes.
so he couldn't do it. He couldn't make it as an actor in Mexico. But the owner of this TV network saw that he didn't only have the English proficiency. He was an American citizen, and he was great in sales. So he was a great vocal and personality.
Yeah.
Anybody
Oh
who wants to
yeah.
be an actor, it's a great storytelling. And so he started to send Reynold. Actually, there is a funny story of the son of El León, that then became very, very famous, El Tigre, told Reynold, Reynold, here in Mexico, everybody would like to call you Rey. So
Uh-huh.
the only Rey here is my dad, cabrón. So I'm gonna call you Rene from now on.
René.
Yes. So everybody knew him as Rene.
Wow.
Rene Anselmo, and that last name is kind of Latino too, but it was an
Uh-huh.
Italian descendant from Boston. So Rene Anselmo came to the U.S., represented the company to start selling Mexican movies, Mexican telenovelas, and there was this little TV station in San Antonio called Spanish International Network. Very little, very poor,
Oh.
losing money, and just starting the business in a very strange market. And when Rene came back to Mexico, saying there is this little station, the Leon said, "You know what? Let's buy it. Let's start our dream of
Yeah.
going to the U.S. by acquiring it." So the whole story of how the acquisition was made is in the book, and that's how everything started. And so Rene Anselmo was the owner to evade that law of foreign ownership. I
Wow.
explain in the book how he legally did it. And so they started to buy small rural TV stations and then urban TV stations and then connect all of them. And they built this fourth network that is now Univision.
That is crazy. I love the story. And loving I love the history of it. Because it's not, I mean, you right now see just as a big company, right? And millions of people and all over the country and in other countries too, Latin America, all of that. But you don't know what it took to get there,
Oh, yeah.
right?
It
Like,
was a
and
lot of risk and temerary decisions, like
yeah,
going around that law, like start buying TV, like doing a Spanish only TV station.
exactly.
Everybody thought he was crazy.
And I love that you were talking about that because one of my questions was actually related to that. In the 70s, 80s, ABC, NBC, CBS, they dominated the American television, right? And I was wondering, like, what did actually take for the Spanish language network, to break into that system?
Is the history of our community, the resilience of our community. The because you would ask yourself why ABC, CBS, and NBC didn't do any content in Spanish if they knew there were millions of people speaking
Yeah,
Spanish, because they didn't want us to speak Spanish. They thought that having the three networks and this law and everything and the assimilation. Remember, at those times, kids were being punished by speaking Spanish.
yeah,
Uh, and that story is in the book. I mean, the type of punishment the kids have in the schools in the border. If the
mm,
teachers would listen to the kids speaking Spanish, they would be punished, and they will
yeah,
tell their parents, "Do not let them speak." You didn't have that Spanish-speaking music on radio at all.
yeah.
I mean, the first, in order to get to the Bad Bunny era, we
Oh,
had
yeah.
to we have to go. I mean, the first kind of crossover was La Bamba, La Canción La Bamba,
La Bamba.
from Richie Valens. Actually, his name was not, it was Valenzuela, his last name, Ricardo Valenzuela, and he had to change the name to Richie Valens. Even though the song was in Spanish, it was La Bamba or Santana, the rock player. He was famous
Yeah,
in Woodstock, but he was never labeled as a Latino musician,
true.
because that will jeopardize his fame and his so
The
uh, in
credibility.
in that
Yeah,
same way, Spanish speaking TV, whenever this executive wanted to sell advertising in Spanish, companies would say no. There are very harsh answers, like for example a big toothpaste company that I won't mention the brand, told the marketing manager told the sales guy from the TV station, "Do you guys brush your teeth really?
yeah,
We just don't like their kind of people. That's why we don't buy advertisers." So at that type of discriminatory answers were they getting. So they would have to sell the advertising for pennies compared with the other
wow.
TV stations. But the community kept growing. The culture, Mexican and Latin American culture. Remember then, Cubans came to Florida,
Yeah,
uh, Colombians, Puerto Ricans, and Dominicans came to New York.
okay.
The whole California, Texas, and remember before the 1800s, Texas, California, Arizona, and Nevada was all Spanish speaking, and
Yeah,
and and then part of Wyoming, part of Utah, of course, Florida, Puerto Rico. Um, but even though we had millions of people, there was always a force to stop the use of Spanish. But this TV,
yeah,
that's why the importance of this history and this book, because the national TV in Spanish was a catalyst for the Spanish to keep empowering our people. And not only were Latinos driving this. For example, Richard Nixon in 1969, the President Nixon, that was actually asked to renounce the presidency, um, he said, I don't want to hear about the Cubans. I don't want to hear about Colombians, about Mexicans. I want everybody to speak Spanish in one word. So he commissioned a committee, and that's where the word Hispanic was starting to use in the U.S. I
Yeah.
know there is a literal meaning of Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, etc., but the the Hispanic word was a business, a political word, actually officially assigned by the government in order to have one Hispanic vote, in order to have one Hispanic market.
Oh, wow. You definitely enlightened me with that because, we normally look for the definitions of what's Hispanic, right? What is Latino? What is Latinx? And I get a bunch of people to ask me that, because as a Colombian, they're like, Lina, what, are you Latina? Are you Hispanic? Are you? And I'm just like, there's different definitions of that. People will say the Hispanic are people just from Central America, or that Latinos are just all over Latin America. That's why they say Latinos. Like, there's a bunch of definitions, but I love that you are, you coming from that time also and knowing all this, the history of it, where it actually was implemented.
It's
So
so important. It's so
it's
important for
very,
especially your generation to understand um, why 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 this community is so prosperous, and why this community kept growing for the benefit not only of our people, for the benefit of the government because they were looking for a vote, for the benefit of corporate America because they were looking for our money and our production and our work, and so this what's happening now of the prosecution of unfairly prosecution of immigrants, and the way they're being treated, and the way the administration is trying to impose the English speaking in the country. It's not the first time that this happened.
yeah,
It
it's
happened.
not.
Theodore Roosevelt in 1909 said only English in the U.S.
Yeah, yeah.
and and
And
and then
so many people from here don't even know that.
right.
They
And
don't know
then
that.
Eisenhower did the Operation Wetback, which was a hunting of Hispanics, putting us on cages, no matter your paper, if you had papers or not. If you had an accent and a color of skin, you were put on a cage. And guess what? The only way for Spanish-speaking people to understand what was happening was a Spanish-speaking media, because the English-speaking
Yeah.
media was part of that movement against the Spanish. So I
Oh,
call it
yeah.
I call it one in one article, not in the book, but it's I mean, we're always needed in a particular time, and we are sometimes we sobramos, sometimes we're too many,
Yeah.
and they start
Too
to
many.
so it's a cycle. And
Yes.
that's the young generation should understand. This is not the end of the world. It has happened. Of course, it's very unfair, and I think now we have a lot of tools. In the 50s and 60s and even before, when this happened, it took a long time of this unfair, wild hunting of Hispanics. Then in the 80s, it was more difficult because
Oh, yeah.
Univision was already big, Telemundo was already big, and there was respect for the Hispanic vote. So that lasted short. And right now, look what happened in Minnesota. After 48 hours of the
Oh,
cell phones filming the killing of the two individuals, 48 hours took that for the
yeah.
ICE to get out of Minneapolis.
It's like you're touching so many important topics that I can stay with you, for the entire day, because I love to know all of this, and having these conversations is opening, the eyes of what is really happening and what really happened in the past. And that's still a cycle, and it's still repeating because sometimes we don't know the history, so we repeated it, right?
Yep.
And for this, when you talk about all these situations and what it has taken, over the years for the Spanish media to be here, I wonder, we're talking about power, we're talking about cultural differences, language differences, skin, all of that. So I wonder, and you can tell me more about what was the most power struggle that, let's say, help it or not to shape the networks in Spanish, evolution.
It's a great question. At the beginning, the money was difficult because the advertisers didn't want to come in with a fair price. There was even in the book in 1981, there was like a Woodstock in Spanish. The Madison Square Garden, the owners of the the TV network, the Mexican family with the front man, Rene, um, they decided to do this 2 days sold out concert at Madison Square Garden to show the people, to show corporate America that we had a prosperous community that behaved well, that comes to a concert, and it was the first time, and for 48 hours, Camilo Sesto, Juan Gabriel, you name it, Lola Beltran, all of those artists were for 2 days, 3 hours each day. It was broadcast in the U.S. and Mexico. And guess what? The next day, after this, the newspapers of the U.S. never mention it. I found just one little article in New York Times that said Latinos don't like rock and roll.
What?
Yeah, and the article is all typed in the book. Yeah, I mean it was 2 days in the sold out at Madison Square Garden. You had like I believe Elton John was before and Van Halen was after.
Oh yeah.
And this Latino, it was called La Fiesta Hispana, and so I'm telling you, this is a great story, but at the same time was struggling for the owners because they did all this, and guess what? The media didn't pay attention, and the corporate America still didn't buy. So that was one struggle. But the biggest struggle is that when they were growing, and the country started to understand the power of the Hispanic community in the U.S. in 1986, where we were close to 20 million already in the U.S. The government forced the sale of the station to an American company. So they told the Mexican family, you have to sell your shares. The same thing that's happening right now with TikTok, and they pulled the Chinese out, and that happened there. So Hallmark cards from Missouri that had nothing to do with Spanish speaking, bought Spanish International Network, and that's when they changed the name to Univision.
Wow. That is so crazy.
And then the Mexican family came back. So you have to get the book because then they came back after in 1991. But in 1986, they get rid of the shares for the Mexican. But guess what? Everybody wanted to still watch the Mexican telenovelas. Everybody wanted to keep watching El Chavo, El Chapulín, Sábado Gigante.
Yes. I watched them all.
Yeah, we all. And the news in Spanish was very important at that time.
Just taking a quick pause here. Enjoying the convo so far? Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more fun, tips, and stories from Lina and JC.
Mixed Grounds is proud to present I Just Wanted to Push Record, celebrating arts, community, and culture.
And we are on. Oh, wait. I almost forgot to push record. Now over to Lina and JC.
JC, you're missing out. I'm like, wow, you're missing out with so much history and so many important things that, oh my gosh.
So we went from the 60s to the 80s, and we're now when Univision started, when they changed the name. So it was a Mexican family that started it. Then the government of the U.S. Forced them to sell all the shares and make St. Louis, Missouri company, Hallmark cards, the Hallmark cards that we all know, to buy them out in 1986. And there was this hero that if it wasn't for her, Univision wouldn't exist. In 1986, there was this judge, the first woman federal judge in California, Mariana Falser, who did the whole transaction of the forced sales of the network. And guess what? Hallmark Cards didn't want to have a Spanish TV network. Obviously, it's a company from Missouri. They wanted to have the fourth network in English. And Rupert Murdoch, the actual Rupert Murdoch, he wanted also that TV network. He became American. He was born in Australia, but he became American citizen in 1985 to build the fourth network. So he was also waiting for this license to be canceled and given to him, or buy it for pennies. And then La Jueza, the Judge Maria Falser, in the middle of the litigation and the transaction, said this station stays in Spanish language for the next 17 years.
Oh, wow. But 17 was just an arbitrary number? Just
The
17?
length of the license.
Okay.
So she's a hero. She's a person that is unknown. I dedicated almost a chapter to her. We should build a statue of her because she was the one who obligated the whole power players of this country, government, because Hallmark cards, I discovered, was one of the first financiers of George Bush father.
Okay. Okay.
And remember,
Okay.
George Bush was the vice president of Ronald Reagan. So you can connect.
Wow, how that connection, yes.
The money flow there.
Yeah, follow what they say, always follow the money, right? Follow the money.
Yeah. So that's another great story in the book, which is the Judge Mariana Falser. If it wasn't for her, I don't think we would have strong, powerful Spanish TV networks in the U.S.
Wow.
What even after that inception of the story, what has helped maintain it over the years?
Well, the prosperity and the big Spanish-speaking community in the U.S. We started with 3 million in the 60s, and right now it's 62 by the census, but I would say we're close to 70 million. And remember, this is a country that is driven by money and politics. So, of course, there was a force to get rid of the use of Spanish. Of course, there was a racist force against Hispanics. But also, there was an economic force that wanted this market. There was a political force that wanted this vote. So that's my answer to your question. What kept the importance of the Spanish TV network national? Because remember, there were always local newspapers, local radio stations, but there was only a national TV network. There was Univision until 1987, when Telemundo, that was created in Puerto Rico way before, but it was only a Puerto Rican TV station, was purchased by another group of American investors and became the rival of Univision. So both networks, Univision and Telemundo, have always been the leaders or let's say the catalyst of the prosperity of the Hispanic vote and the Hispanic market business.
What would you say, and looking even forward, what would you say is going to help sustain it? Like with this moment in time in media where we are right now, with some people having lack of trust, misinformation, but the essential information that needs to get out to a specific population, what do you foresee if you had to predict what does it look like in the next 17 years or the next 20 years?
Well, the book doesn't cover that, but there is definitely the need of a catalyst for this. Right now, it's crazy. Right now, still Telemundo and Univision drag most of the money of the Spanish-speaking advertising. We're talking about $3 to $5 billion. I mean, that gap is huge because it depends on what the technology platforms are getting from the Hispanic market. But like I was telling Lina, this is all a cycle. The cycle of the hunting for the Hispanic has happened before. The cycle of big forces trying to reduce the economic power of Hispanic has happened before. But before we were 3 million, we didn't have any political representative. I tell in the book the story of the first Hispanic politician from Texas that became Henry Bermudez Gonzalez, who became a congressman and never lost. And now see how many political leaders we have in Congress and even in the Supreme Court and even in the even in the cabinet of the current administration, Marco Rubio. And so to answer your question, I think the power of these two big conglomerates still huge. One is owned by one of the networks. Telemundo is owned by NBC, Universal, and Univision is owned by the Mexican family who came back, which is a fascinating story how they came back, and private equity firms. And they are all in the same dilemma of all the media industry. So I'm pretty sure there will be, I'm pretty sure now. I think one of the possible scenarios could be consolidation of these two big brands with some technology platforms. But the story is so fascinating that that you will confirm their resilience. I mean, they started with zero money and with a lot of debt, and the U.S. forced them to sell for good money. By the way, I mean they paid them very good money. And technology has always been an important fact. But look at what happened with Bad Bunny on the music part, right? The crossover. There's no more crossover. I think it's a reverse crossover now.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. The story to get to Bad Bunny, I was telling Lena, I mean, before Santana and Richie Valens with La Bamba, they were not named Hispanic or Latino artists. They were, Ricardo Valenzuela was named Richie Valens. Santana was Santana Rock, the rock legend. And they were Latin beats, Latin music, Latin rhythm. And then you didn't see Hispanic talents, more or less. I mean, you didn't see African American talent. You didn't see on TV. Actually, the first guy who tried to put Spanish on TV was in the 50s. There was this comedy show called the Lucille Ball Show. Her husband was Cuban, Ricardo. His legal name was Desi Arnaz, but his artist name was Ricky Ricardo. And Ricky Ricardo was singing Spanish in the show of Lucille Ball and speaking Spanish, but suddenly he stopped. He was censored by the network. But then, in the 80s, Gloria Estefan and Miami Sound Machine and Selena Quintanilla on the West Coast, they started to break through. That was the first. Julio Iglesias with Willie Nelson duet. It was very famous as well. So that's when the machine started to move, and you start to see some Hispanic talents on TV. And then streaming, iPod was created not long ago, 2006, 2000, and 2000 was the iPod, and then the iPhone, the social media, and that's when Shakira and everybody. So the same thing that's happening in music and crossover on news is not happening. On news they are reducing the news in Spanish, but that has to change because everybody is realizing how our community narrative is being manipulated.
Well, and I'm going to say too, it's funny how you say that, a lot of the things just repeat itself. Like how many times have we seen a group of people be marginalized for doing what they need to do in order to help a community, a people, or a movement? And every time that is, squashed, somehow it gets stronger or it gets more prolific, right? Like when you were talking about Desi Arnaz, like to realize that they tried to censor him, but then he wound up ultimately having the whole studio and actually having his stop within CBS, right? Like, so when you see that no matter what they try to do to compress, constrain, hold down, I think especially when it comes to the arts, and I look at media as a form of art in itself, but when you look at trying to suppress the arts, it's suppressible, right? And for those people who need it, like you're talking about local news now, that's one of the struggles that, in everything that's happening in the media, local media still winds up being a pillar because who's going to tell that story of what happened on Main Street? And then are you going to get a Google to actually commit to building a station, filling the newsroom? No, they're going to want to rely on these smaller stations to get their information. And I think, like you just said, same thing for music. We can have the Spotifys of the world. We can have the Pandoras of the world. But it's those artists who have that specific music that touch culture, that touches people in a very individual way, that lifts them up. And as you say, the crossover is gone. Like it's all mainstream, right? The access is now universal access, So I think it's amazing how like that history and itself can actually provide a sense of resilience and hope in what otherwise might be like a dark time in media.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's why history is so important for younger generations to understand. The fight has never stopped, and
Yeah.
there are great times, there are bad times, and there are growth. Then there is reduction. Then there's cancellation, and has happened in the past. Right now, with technology, everything's passed so fast that I do believe that learning history, calm anxiety, because with this so much going on, that creates anxiety, and when you are so anxious, there is no reasoning of how to solve it or how to look at the future. But if you read history or you learn history with podcasts like yours, it's so important because I wouldn't say we give hope, but we give the tools to at least calm the anxiety and rethink how to um, how to use AI towards our benefits, or how to
Yeah.
use Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny impact to a cultural benefit. And history always gives tools. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And now that you mentioned Bad Bunny, it's funny because like people is like, oh, aren't you excited that Bad Bunny's gonna be there? And I'm like, being honest, as a Latina, I am, right? Because it's a big thing. It's history. It's making history. Having the Spanish in a
Oh, yeah.
big event, you know, being through like the power that is like they wanted to shut it down, right? Because it was in Spanish. And I'm not a fan of the music, but just the movement and seeing the mass and seeing all the Hispanic and Spanish Latinos, like anything, related to our culture, that everyone was like happy about it. I was like, yes, I'm for it, you know?
Right. And I understand when people feels that it's annoying to have another table in a restaurant speaking another language. I understand. They don't understand what we're talking. Um, but they just not. They should not respond with hate. They should understand the roots of why that's happening. If everybody will understand and just not do not take for granted that this shouldn't be Spanish speaking here, just to understand why there was a territory here that was Spanish speaking before 1776. There was this. This is not the typical immigrant enclave. The culture and the language has been empowered not only by the community being resilient and rebel. There was a big proportion of pro immigrants, and you're seeing on the street who is filming the unfairness. They're not all Hispanics. It's everybody. A big portion of this country has always been against the unfair treatment of the deportations, like slavery in the past, like the way the community feels about it. Of course, there is racism, of course, but there is
Yeah.
also another force, and Univision and Telemundo is a reflection of that force. I'm not saying that what they're doing is good. Sometimes Univision and Telemundo, like right now, are being used to manipulate
Yeah.
and by the big powers. But it's a reflection that Spanish is here to stay. I mean, right now we are close to 70 million, and according to the census, close to 40 million don't speak good English. So the Spanish speaking, if you don't give it importance on the information, like what Bonnie did in the halftime show, which was explaining the cultural situation in Puerto Rico, if we don't extrapolate that and do it a national message of the Hispanic culture, guess what? The dark side will manipulate our people, because people are, through narrative, can be manipulated.
No, yeah, definitely.
Well, I wouldn't, obviously, since I got caught up in the airport, I didn't get to see how much you all went into the book, but I am curious to know how is your book from your point of view? How has it been received by the masses? Like, what are the different opinions? Are they, as a monolith? How has it been received and the material? Because this is not, like you said, this is not lightweight stuff. Like, this stuff
Oh yeah.
is historic and deep, and it requires some processing. So how's it been received?
That's why I'm so appreciative that you guys call me, because I mean, talking about other media is never easy, and especially big, powerful media when you talk about them. I'm not biased because this is a result of it was fact check, and it's a result of 20 years of um, of research. So in Spanish has been very well received by the people. I'm not being,
Right,
even
right.
though I have a
Yeah.
big publisher, the media, Univision hasn't talked to me. That gives you an
That's
idea.
interesting. Yeah, that's
That
interesting.
is, yeah.
Telemundo did, but they haven't aired yet. But I don't care. I mean, I'm being as organic as possible. I'm a business owner, so I know I love this type of challenges. So the Spanish speaking is doing good. The English speaking is slow. The typical answer of media is, this is a product for Hispanic Heritage Month.
Got
Yep.
it. Yep. It sounds so familiar and typical.
Yep.
I mean, Lena knows, but I spent some time working with PBS and NPR for a matter of years, and now work a lot closer with local community stations. And it is amazing how, when, like you said, media talking about a media, all last year when we were talking about rescission and the funding being removed from the public media stations, right, throughout the country, how often do we get other media stations chiming in on that, knowing very well that its ability to historically be able to educate, inspire, and inform just through public media? Ken Burns is not necessarily one of my favorites, but that's one of the names you can drop that everybody knows. When you say, oh yeah, Ken Burns. But his ability to capture some history and share it to an audience
Yep.
that is going to empower them later on. But nobody came to the rescue. It was like a second piece story. It was just like, PBS is going to lose funding. Okay, next story, right? And it's
Yep.
always interesting. But I would almost predict that what you're going to see from public media now is they now have to return back to those virtuous roots and principles of taking care of the people, serving the people first. That's what, in my opinion, that's what media is about: serving the people, keeping an informed electorate, allowing them to be empowered by history, education, and information so that they can go out and be impactful citizens through the world. And so I think, to your point earlier about things repeating, the value will come back to that. And I'll go on the record of predicting that you'll see your book and how it's going to be recognized by the English media. It may not be right at this moment, but it will stand out. And someone will say, have you seen this? You should have been seeing this. And it's going to lead to more questions, and it's going to lead to more information. So that's just JC's prediction. Not that that means anything to anybody else, but
Yep.
Yeah, the response of I mean, I would love everybody to read the history because it's politics involved, and there are some funny and at the same time uncomfortable stories. Like, for example, everybody thinks that female anchors showing their legs in newscasts was a creation of Fox News and Royal Island. No, I tell the story in the book how Univision was a lady, an executive, who said, if we want to appeal to women and men, we have to show and that the first open set of a newscast where the whole body was shown was Univision. And or other stories, the treatment of women on and within Sábado Gigante, and it was very controversial, and
right.
Oh, yeah.
told as well. And of course, at that time was accepted. At that time, it was accepted, but it have to be told. And so there's an entire chapter this executive wanted to have a beauty contest, right? The typical beauty contest that in Latin America is so famous, and Miss Universe, etc. And economically, it wasn't attractive because the executive in the U.S. said, beauty contest is once a year. Why do we do all this effort for once a year event? And this guy and these people decided, no, let's do a beauty contest every week and put it in Sábado Gigante, and all the advertisers of Sábado Gigante will pay for it. And it was a tremendous success.
Yeah.
Yeah, those stories. Like, I didn't know that story. Like,
The soccer, for example, the football. The soccer in Latin America is a religion, but there is a reasoning behind it, and it's TV. The first transmission of a World Cup full color, was in 1970 by by the same Mexican TV network that bought the U.S. It was in 1970. That was the first time people in the world saw Pelé playing
Mm,
full color. And it wasn't the first World Cup of Pelé, it was his fourth.
Oh wow.
Okay. And that story is right there. How
Mhm.
the business of soccer also conquered the US. It took years. It's just
Yeah.
you're just seeing that um, uh, right now, but it's a huge story behind the programming, how they manage the programming, because everybody says that Spanish speaking people in the US are not a monolithic market. Well, guess
Mhm.
what? Telemundo Univision
Nice.
made it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Uh, I just like every time, like we talk about a topic or something, it just opens another Pandora box that I'm like, I want to know more, right? And I was telling
I give you an
Javier,
idea.
yeah, I was like,
In
I wanted to
Spanish,
know
you
more.
can have it in English too.
When someone is given that type of gift, what would be your advice to them to make sure how they should consume this? Is it like, what should they do? Like, how should they consume it? Because a lot of times you can have some people that read it, that just put it down, they'll be like, oh, well, that was then, this is never now, right? You have
Yep.
other people who will read it and say, you know what, I need to use the word extrapolate. I just need this little bit of spice to do this for my career. Is it a career-oriented book? Is it one that is supposed to benefit? I mean, obviously, it has America in it, so and you're looking at is it a national book, but how would you captivate like what you want them to do with this historic resource?
Yeah. The first, the U.S. is now the second largest country, Spanish-speaking country in the world. Okay, so we already passed Argentina, Spain, Colombia. It's Mexico and then the U.S. So if you know that that's happening, this book will tell you why that happened. Okay, don't look at that as a negative reasoning. Just read the facts of what happened in the U.S. in the last 50 years. That it went up from 3 million to 68 million people Spanish speaking. Second, I will tell you what my second generation think about the book. Um, uh, Uncle, there's too much finance on it. I will tell them, okay, skip it. Skip the finance part. Go to the soap operas. Go to the I mean, there is this story of right now there is a lot of criticism of media, legacy media being biased, right? Either blue or red or uh, um, well, there was a moment in Univision where there was a big discussion. They were imposing a director of news from Mexico into a news desk that was full of Cubans. And the Cubans didn't like Mexicans because still don't like Mexicans because Mexico was a good friend of Fidel Castro, right?
Oh, yeah.
Guess what? Everybody resigned. So the guy came to the news desk and it was empty. Empty. I'm not saying there was no news that day because so if you read that, how the people
Wow.
decided to do that, put it in jeopardize their jobs and but it's very, very, very interesting. So I tell the second generation that in this book you can get very interesting and fun stories, important facts to understand how the money flow because there are many opaque transactions in order to finance all this monster and these two monsters of Telemundo and Univision in the past. And but you can skip the finance and go for an English speaking people that don't understand who the Chapulín Colorado is or who Don Francisco is or doesn't care about Jorge Ramos. They can also skip that and go to the soccer story or to the there are 70
Yeah.
chapters and the last chapter is also what's happening now. um, so I don't know if that answered your question, but
It
but
it does, but I would tell everybody don't skip any of it, right? Because I
Yes.
think because you didn't skip any of it, right? Like it's
I
in
didn't
there
know. I
for a
would
reason. It adds context, it adds color, pun intended, but it adds color to the whole picture of everything that's going on. And so maybe you don't have to read it in your order, but you can read in order your preference and get everything in there. I know that's how I'm going to do it. I want to go back and consume it in
Yeah.
its entirety, right? And be able to look at it because like we just said in the beginning, it's bound to repeat itself. the finance component. Look how much money is going to each. I mean, we're looking at Sirius XM that a lot of people aren't paying attention to, and though that may be seen as radio first, they're quickly transitioning to having video. And the podcasting age, it's the same space that we're in now. It is
Mhm.
still all a form of media, and it's going to turn privatized for a little while, and then you find people come spending money. We try to buy it out, similar to what we just offered about Hallmark. May not be the Hallmark ever
Yeah.
again, right?
Yeah.
Now we could probably, who knows who we could be, you know,
I
about it.
remember,
Yeah.
this reminds me a chapter where the Hallmark cards came to the channel and they didn't know what to do. And they said that,
Yeah.
so the gringos will say, you know what? I want an opera Latina. Hey, look for an
Yeah,
opera
yeah.
Latina. And there was this
Uh-huh.
Chilean guy who was the CEO and found Cristina Saralegui, who was the opera Latina. And there is a show where Oprah says, I'm the Cristina Black. Yeah,
That's awesome.
so that those stories of how the there was a time also when Telemundo was doing bilingual content,
Okay.
trying to get people to assimilate into English,
Yeah.
and it didn't work. There was a time when Univision started a station in English called Fusion. It didn't work.
So interesting.
Well,
It's
it's
so
almost,
interesting.
for me, it's almost like me, Tio. Like I can sit here and I want more stories. Like, give me a story every night. Give me a
I
story
know.
every night.
I was
But
just
now
telling her,
I
like,
have.
I can stay here all day talking with him because it's
Let's
so
do it. Let's do another
interesting.
one. Read the book and let's do another one. I quiz you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
but then I also want you to come back so that we can talk about what the future holds, because I think I would have a lot of fun when we're able to just draw those throughput lines between, like, here's that story I told you about, and look what's happening over here right now. And I think that would be fun. So I would definitely be committed to having you back on. And I
Yeah.
think, and for other people who may not have that much access to you, they should go get the book. Like, the book is what you need to be able to understand it, and you will have you right across from them at story time every day. So, especially
Excellent.
media students, the
Oh,
communication
yeah.
department. I think there's a lot that this book could do to really help the development of those future media personnel. And maybe they don't repeat the same thing. Maybe they realize there's an easier way to do what they think is so complicated. And when they realize that it's not the first time, then it's a light bulb to say, okay, what can I add to it to make it better, to make it mine? How do we build on this rather than
Right.
starting from zero?
And I did wrote this with a lot of passion. It's almost a soap opera.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
almost it's another soap opera.
I was going to say, because I was reading a little bit and then I said, you describe the book as a telenovela, right?
Yeah.
So I can see there's a lot of storytelling, which I love, because that's actually how you get more into it. That is not only like in 1990 and this what happened. It's not historic, timestamps and all that. It's the storytelling
Yeah, I
about it.
was thinking really on people like you, Lina, and really, I mean, it's like reading Stephen. There is a book that Stephen King wrote about writing. Stephen King, the fiction, and
Yeah.
he wrote a book called On Writing. My wife gave it to me, and that and you know what I like? I love to read as well. Women historians, women historians write in the contemporary this book, this truth, written by Jill Lepore. It's a wonderful history of the U.S. Written, and when I say women, I'm not being gender. I'm saying the women have been discriminated so much in the past, and they had such an important role. Like this judge that I told you, nobody knew about this judge.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for her and her intellectual capacity to convince the power players of this country to understand that the channel have to be in Spanish, she was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was a women executive in Univision, Rosita Peru, that I say in the book. She could have been the first CEO of a TV network, but she wasn't because she was a woman.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah.
That is the truth that our history is mired in, and that's, I mean, and how you feel about it, whether you say, hey, this is why or not why, you got to know that it did happen, right?
Yeah.
You can't argue the fact. So I would definitely. So I'm going to commit. We're going to have you back on, and we're going to talk some more, because there's some questions that I would want to know, like how you got your interest just as a young boy. What piqued your interest from a creative standpoint? Because there's a lot of mixtures that go into lead to this young man right here I'm sitting in front of now. So I want to come and unpack some of that. So we'll definitely
Well,
have you back on.
Lina started this podcast with that question.
Okay. Perfect. Great minds. But is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap it all up?
Anything? No, just, the book is available in Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and I would love people to contact me through my Substack or through the web of the book, which is livefromamericabook.com. And why do I want them to contact me? Because if you have a bookstore, a brick and mortar close in your town, and you want the book there, I make it happen.
Beautiful. We'll definitely include that all in our show notes as well. We always put a link to. We'll have a link to the book there as well as that contact information. And again, my apologies for being late, and I won't absolve myself of it. Just life was life. But it has been an honor in this brief time, and I look forward to us joining again. Lina, I'll let you close us out.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Javier, for being with us today. This is a very opening and interesting conversation. I can stay here, and I'm going to repeat it again. I can stay here for a really long time just talking with you. I want to pick your brain and know so much, but I know we're running out of time, and definitely going to bring you on again. I want to read the book for sure. And then we can explore more topics about that. So thank you so much, Javier.
Thank you for the opportunity, you too, and I hope to see you again.
Be well.
Thank you. All right, and this was I Just Wanted to Push Record with Lina.
JC.
And see you next time.
Thank you for listening to I Just Wanted to Push Record, a producer's podcast. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To hear other episodes or read the associated blogs, visit olasmedia.com, and be sure to follow us on Instagram with the handle Olas Media Studio. I Just Wanted to Push Record, a producer's podcast, is produced in studios in San Diego, California, and Tijuana, Baja, California. Olas Media is an IVC media company.